What you know, Ala buyers. Hope you guys are having a good day. It's Monday, February 23rd. We're going to jump into the first witnesses of the Kouri Richins trial. And first up was Eugene Richins, who is Eric's dad. They show a photo of Eric and he identifies him as a son and says that Eric was 39 when he died. He also identifies Kouri in the courtroom. They raised their kids. That family was number one. They were always together, and they really promoted education, religion, and a strong work ethic to their kids. Eric was very athletic and a good student. He would see Eric around 3 times a week, and they talked daily. They would go to the kids' ball games, and Eric would come to the cattle ranch. He said Eric was a very fun-loving person, very likable. He loved people, and people loved him. He said Eric was an excellent father. He coached his son's sports teams, but most importantly, he was their father and their best friend. His dad helped coach too and said that they all were very active in the boys' lives. At the time of Eric's death, they were planning to buy a cabin together. He mentions he's getting older and eventually wanted to retire, and he wanted to put the ranch in Eric and his siblings' laps when he was ready to give it up. On March 4th, 2022, he got a call from Kouri saying Eric wasn't breathing. He got to the house around 4:15. Katie and her husband were there, first responders, and Kouri's mom, Lisa, as well as Eric and Kouri's sons. He stayed until around 10:30 that morning. When his daughter told him that Eric was gone, he said they had to help him to the couch, and he doesn't remember talking to Kouri at all. After Eric's funeral, Kouri told him she had just gotten off the phone with the medical examiner and said that Eric died from COVID as well as fungus of the lungs. That was a condition that ultimately killed Eric's mother. He called his daughter Katie, and she called the medical examiner. The medical examiner said they had never received a call from Kouri, and they had not released the results of the autopsy yet. He was with his wife when she was sick with this lung fungus, and he says Eric never showed any of the symptoms that she had. They showed him some handwriting samples to look at that he had got from a rec center when they were gathering signatures, essentially to show that Kouri had forged Eric's signature on some stuff. And when he got those, he gave them to Katie. That will come in a little later. The defense gets up and says they're sorry for his loss and they have no questions. Next up, Eric's sister, Kouri Richins-Benson. Katie and her husband previously owned the home where Eric and Kouri lived. Katie sold that home to Eric in 2012. They bring in that prenup between Eric and Kouri. The morning Eric died, her dad called screaming and crying and saying that Eric wasn't breathing. Katie's daughter was sick and throwing up and was in her bed with her. Her husband had gone into another room, and then Katie's phone rang. It was her dad. She said, "Dad, how did you know I was up with my sick little girl?" He then told her Eric wasn't breathing, so she said she screamed and fell to the floor. Her husband heard everything and ran in. He thought something was wrong with their daughter since she had just gotten sick, so he checked on her and told Katie she's okay, but Katie said no, it's Eric. So they got their kids and drove to Eric's house. Once they arrived at Eric's and Kouri's, police and first responders were already on scene. Katie found Eric's boys and took them into a room, gave them some toys just to keep them away from everything that was happening. When asked by the prosecutor if she observed Kouri that morning, Katie said she saw Kouri just shaking her head at her, and she immediately knew Eric was gone. She also thought Kouri wasn't acting like she usually did during overnight visits. Kouri was wearing a matching set of pajamas, and her hair was done, and she wasn't crying like Katie was. Katie asked Kouri several times when they should tell the boys that their dad had died. And at that point, Eric's body was being wheeled out of the house, and her husband tried to block the boys from seeing it, but they saw it anyway, and they got upset. Katie told Kouri the boys had seen their dad being wheeled out, and Kouri said, "I guess we better tell him." So she asked for the boys. Kouri told them that their dad was dead, and one of the boys got extremely upset. Katie went to check on him several times and found him in his bed with the covers pulled up. She sat beside him and tried to comfort him, but he wanted his mom. Katie told Kouri several times that her son needed him and told her to go be with her son. And eventually, Katie told Kouri, "I'm not his mom or his dad. Your son is very upset and I can't comfort him. Please go talk with him." When Kouri finally went to the room, the child jumped out of the bed and ran to her, and they sat on the floor together and they were hugging. While Kouri was with her sons, Kouri's brother Ronnie's fiancée Brienne Sorensen came in the room and proceeded to talk about the closing on the Midway mansion. The prosecutor asked how Kouri reacted to that, and Katie said Kouri was very businesslike and was telling Bree what to do. This shocked Katie, obviously, and said, "You can't tell me you're going to close on this mansion when my brother just died." Kouri told her the money had already gone through, Eric had nothing to do with it, and that she was going to move forward. One of Kouri's sons asked for his dad's Apple Watch, so Kouri got the watch and deleted everything on it and then handed it over to her son. Then Katie said Kouri talked about selling the house. Katie said she was in shock. She really couldn't think, but Kouri's already talking about selling the house that Eric had just been wheeled out of dead. And again, just the fact that Kouri was talking about moving forward with the closing on that mansion, it just blew her mind. She couldn't understand it. But at the time of Eric's death, the marital home was held in that trust with Eric as the trustee. And after his death, Katie became the trustee. Kouri was already figuring out a plan of how to manage the stone masonry business, saying that she wanted to hire one of Eric's friends named TJ to oversee Eric's portion of the company for her. Katie said this was discussed the exact same day Eric passed away. The day after Eric's death, they were talking about funeral arrangements, including burying Eric near his mother. They also talked about who would speak and be pallbearers and all the things you talk about when you have to arrange this stuff. Kouri's mom, Lisa, brought up Eric wanting to be cremated, and she said they went back and forth about this. It upset her dad because he knew Eric wanted to be buried, but ultimately they did decide to bury him. The state hands Katie copies of Eric's will and also some handwriting samples. They talk about what's in the binder, like documents and tax stuff and Eric's handwriting. Then it was time for cross, and that was Nestor up to cross-examine. She hands Katie Eric's living trust, and it shows that Kouri and the boys were the beneficiaries of that trust. Then she asked Katie to explain her role as the trustee. Katie said to administer the trust and to carry out Eric's wishes. That trust also held Eric's assets. When asked if she is paid for her role as trustee, she said Eric did include a provision that allowed her to be compensated for her time managing that trust, but she's never taken any payment. She's asked if Kouri would have needed to go through her if she wanted to use any monies from that trust, like to purchase a car. Katie said there's been significant litigation, and about 3 weeks after Eric's death, Kouri filed a lawsuit seeking to set aside the trust, meaning any matters would be handled through attorneys. But she's asked if Kouri wanted to use money from the trust, it would be Katie's responsibility to disperse the monies to Kouri. And Katie says yes. Katie also says it was her responsibility to keep up the house and do repairs and any payments related to the home. They ask about her statements regarding Kouri's appearance when Eric died, and she was wearing pajamas. But what about Kouri's hair? And Katie said it was very neatly done. And the defense says that's what you recall? And Katie says yes. They bring in some body cam where you see Kouri hug Katie, and it shows that Kouri's hair was not perfectly done. So the defense says your memory was wrong, and Katie says, this was 4 years ago, to be fair. The defense asked Katie about a conversation she had with a female officer, Officer Woody, outside the house the morning Eric died, and asked if she told the officer she thought Kouri was involved. Katie said she did not. They asked whether Katie told the officer Kouri had taken money from her brother, and Katie said she did tell the officer that. When asked why she told the officer about the money issues, Katie said she just had an overwhelming feeling that she should let somebody know. The defense asked because she thought Kouri was behind it. Katie said, I didn't say that. Defense asked whether she told the officer that she was the trustee of the Eric Richins Trust, and Katie doesn't remember telling Officer Woody about that. They ask about the Apple Watch, and if Kouri hadn't wiped the Apple Watch, her son would be able to see everything on it. Katie doesn't know. Defense asked Katie about saying she only saw Eric use Advil, and then asked if she was aware he took other stuff, and Katie said she learned about the THC after his death. The defense asked about her family's views on drug use, and Katie said their mom was not at all opposed to marijuana. Eric would drink socially, but he was responsible, and he did not drink in front of her. And the defense says, surely Eric didn't talk to you about his sex life, and Katie's like, yeah, actually he did. So she asked if Katie knew that Eric was taking testosterone, and she did. After Eric's body was removed from the scene, were you able to go anywhere in the house? Katie said before she could not go down the hallway, but once they removed him, she was able to move freely around the house. Did you see police searching the kitchen? She saw them going through the garbage, but she wasn't around all the time, so she doesn't know if they searched anywhere else. She's asked if she overheard officers interviewing Kouri, and she did not. The defense asked about whether Eric told her that he used hydrocodone, and Katie says yes. The defense points out that pill bottle was from 2016. Katie said Eric had a medical procedure, but he really didn't like using hydrocodone, so she actually recommended somebody for him to go see to get acupuncture to help with his pain management to keep him from having to use the pain pills. She said he only used it when his pain was extreme, but he never used up the whole prescription. And she said the acupuncture was really successful very quickly for Eric. She's asked if she saw the prenup, and she did. She's asked if Kouri was giving up any claim to Eric's businesses, and Katie said that would only be in the event of a divorce, but if Eric died, Kouri would get the business. As far as the business, would it automatically go to the trust with Katie as the trustee? Katie said this part was a business trust. Do you remember telling the officer Kouri was upset about that? No. Katie was asked by someone on scene if Eric took any pills. She offered to go check his truck and went into the garage. She said Kouri's mom followed her, and so did Bree, which is her brother's fiance, but she doesn't think Eric's other sister, Amy, was there with him. You were asked if Kouri would have been able to sell the house, and your answer was no. Katie said correct. She couldn't because it wasn't Kouri's asset. The house was in the trust, and her name was not on the deed. The defense, but she was a spouse under the law and had a marital interest in the house. Katie says this is a civil court issue. I cannot answer that. She's asked if she was in on the conversation of whether or not Eric would have an autopsy, and she said that day we knew he would have one. You organized an effort to gather a bunch of Eric's signatures to compare and see if Kouri forged his signature. Katie said that was for the civil lawsuit. She did hire an expert to look over the handwriting samples, and the expert was paid. The defense hands her a paper and asked if she paid other experts in this investigation. She did. One was for a forensic financial accountant to look at any claims the estate may have. They hired Brooke Harrington, and she was paid over $14,000 on June 21st, 2023, which was after Kouri's arrest. Eventually, Ms. Harrington quit and started working for the state, so the family hired a new forensic accountant for Eric's estate. She's asked if she was the one that told the state about Mrs. Harrington, and she did not. On March 21st, 2022, before they knew Eric's cause of death, you sent an email to the chief detective, the same one you talked to in the driveway, with a timeline of everything suspicious Kouri had done in the past few years. Katie said Eric's death was suspicious and she wanted to get this kind of stuff to authorities. The defense says you went all the way back to 2016. Katie was like, yep. You did some investigation about Kouri's businesses and forwarded that to investigators. She said she personally did not. Do you remember in May of 2022, suggesting to the investigators Kouri may have tried to kill Eric on Valentine's Day? Katie says yes, because Eric talked to her about it. Did you do online sleuthing into her mother's Venmo and someone named Susan's Venmo and send that to investigators? Katie did not research that herself, but she did forward whatever was found to investigators. They bring in the email from Katie to the investigator. It says attached is Lisa Darden's Venmo feed. She sent several payments to Susan. If you Google Susan, her name comes up with drug charges in Heber. Susan's only friend on Venmo is Lisa Darden, Kouri's mom. Did you get access to Kouri's bank records? Katie says a long time down the road. How did you get those without her permission? And Katie says the only bank records that I got was through litigation from the civil suit. You talked to investigators multiple times and Detective Woody as well before they even went into the house that day? Yes. Did you send potential witnesses to the state? And she said in emails. Kouri stayed in the house until her arrest, and the defense says after that, you took charge of maintaining the home. Katie said before her arrest, I was fixing water leaks and paying anything having to do with the home. Did law enforcement need access to search the home after Kouri's arrest? Katie says yes. She's asked how many times, 10 or 11. She doesn't know. Katie put her husband over all that. They did have a security camera put in the house, but again, her husband was over all that. Did you plan a celebration of life beyond the funeral? Katie says no, we had the funeral. What about April 1st? Katie has no idea. On a redirect, Kouri filed a lawsuit against Katie as trustee 3 weeks after Eric's death. Katie said it was actually threatened soon after he died, and she hired attorneys. They talk about Eric going to get money from the bank, and when he tried, he had none because Kouri had emptied his bank account. That's something Katie did send to investigators, and also she let them know that Kouri signed Eric's name on that HELOC loan. Also, that Eric found multiple credit cards in his name that he had no clue even existed. On a recross for the HELOC, you think Kouri got one on the house without Eric knowing? And Katie says, yes, Eric told me. You had to revoke other powers of attorney invoked by Eric so you would have the final power of attorney. Katie said that's something Eric signed after Kouri took out the HELOC. He revoked Kouri's power of attorney. And she says there is ongoing litigation about this because Eric did not know he signed something giving Kouri that power of attorney. Eric did see a divorce attorney about 1.5 years before he died. In fact, her husband set him up with the attorney. Did Kouri ask you to pay her anything the year after Eric died? And she says not that she can remember. That was it for her. And next on the stand is Clint Benson. That's Katie's husband. He and Katie lived in that home before Kouri and Eric moved in. After Eric's death, he had a locksmith come and change the locks and also hired a security company to watch the house for a few days. He also got internet connected to be able to install security cameras. And he taped the doors so he could know if anybody went in or out of the house. And his phone would alert him if there was motion detected. If police needed to ever go in the house, they would go through him. He said that sometimes the kids would need personal things out of the home, and he would make sure they got it. November of 2020, Eric called Katie, and she put him on speaker. Eric was very angry, and he was on his way to their house. Clint pulled up the Summit County Recorder's website, and he found that $250,000 HELOC that was taken out against the marital home, and he told Eric about it. That's when they started talking about Eric seeing a divorce attorney. Eric asked his brother-in-law who he suggested, so Clint suggested an attorney for him to see. He took care of all the kids during this time. His daughter, bless her heart, was still throwing up all over the floor. And he said the boys did see Eric being wheeled out of the house, and one of the boys just really broke down. A little later, he overheard Kouri talking about running Eric's business with some guy. On cross, he did not go to the attorney with Eric. He said Eric knew Kouri was watching his emails, and he did not want Kouri to know he was looking into a divorce. He's asked if law enforcement asked to go in the home around 10 times since 2023. And Clint says that sounds about right. The last time being 2 weeks ago. They asked if the private investigator was paid $100,000 out of the trust money that was meant for the boys, and he said yes. He's asked if their private investigator was giving information to investigators, and also if Clint got information meant for investigators, and he said yes to both. Mr. Gabler, the private investigator, was let into the home a number of times to look through things. Were you with him each time? Yes. Did he move things around the home? Clint said that the private investigator would document everything he did, so he assumes it would be in that. He's not sure if the private investigator videotaped when he was in the house, but he believes he did audio tape when he was in the home. He thinks the private investigator removed some documents. Was he looking for things to help the state? He says no, he was doing his own investigation. Who's been in the home the last 60 days? And Clint says he has, as well as the defense's private detective and sheriff's deputies. The defense asked if he's ever seen Kouri grieving immediately after losing someone close to her in her life, and he says no. He's asked what the kids could see as far as when Eric was being taken out of the house. He said that Eric was covered with a sheet. The next witness, Vincent Nguyen with the Summit County Sheriff's Office, they bring in his body camera at the home starting around 3:40 a.m. The first thing you see is Eric's body blurred out on the floor. You can hear the chest compression machine being used on Eric, and first responders are on the floor with him. He asked Kouri what medications Eric takes, and she just doesn't know. She's crying. Kouri says they were fine. They had a drink and went to bed around 9:30, and she went to lay down with her son, and when she left, Eric was laying on his back. She's asked where are her kids, and she said one is asleep and the other two are at their door. Then Kouri asks if she can call her mother. The cop hands Kouri his phone and she says, "Mom, come to the house. Something's wrong." Eric isn't breathing and Lisa says she's on her way. Kouri tells the deputy that Eric does take THC gummies before bed. On camera, you can hear the paramedics say that some blood came out when they started compressions and that Eric was cold. They also relay that Eric took THC gummies and hydrocodone. He was on the floor when they got there. Kouri said that she pulled him on the floor as the dispatcher directed her to. They asked Kouri questions and she said that Eric was cold and she put blankets on him and that he felt heavy. She said he's active. He just didn't die in his sleep. This is insane. They asked her about prescriptions, medical histories. Kouri said he was pale last night, and she asked if he was okay. He said his chest was hurting, but she said he did not take illicit drugs. However, in high school, he did use pain pills. At this point, Kouri's mom is at the house, and Kouri's just saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." Her mom mentions she didn't recognize the number when she got the call on the deputy's phone. And Lisa tells the deputy that Eric had allergy shots yesterday. At this point, Katie gets there and she's just screaming, "What happened? Where's my brother? Can I see my brother?" The deputies ask Kouri if she can take her boys upstairs. Katie is on the front porch with the police. She tells them she's Eric's power of attorney and she is shaking like a leaf, bless her heart. And she tells her husband, Clint, to go upstairs with the boys and their children. Katie's just breathing really, really heavy and falls to the floor. Kouri goes over to hug her. Katie says, "Oh my God, I've got to breathe. I have to breathe." And she asked Kouri what happened. And she said Eric's body was cold. Katie talks about losing her brother, but says, "We're going to get through this somehow for the boys. We have to for the boys, okay? It doesn't seem real." Kouri says, "No, it doesn't." Kouri says she can't talk to Eric's dad. And Katie asks the officer if they need to do anything. And the officer says they're following protocols and the detectives and medical examiner are on the way. Katie and Kouri are talking and crying together, and Kouri keeps saying how cold Eric was. The officer asks if there's any animals that sleep with Eric, and Kouri said he does sleep with a dog, but the dog wasn't there. Kouri asks about Eric's dad, and she says, I don't. Katie says she'll talk to him, and her sister Amy is almost there as well. The officer asked Katie to tell the family they cannot pass the threshold in the home while the investigation is happening in the bedroom. And that was pretty much the end of the body camera. Kouri just didn't have any visual reaction to this at all, to me. Prosecutor moves in some pictures and photos from the body camera, and then they show on screen a voluntary statement that was handwritten by Kouri. The witness was responsible for the crime scene log as well as the death checklist. He said he was looking around for anything that might explain Eric's death. They asked about Kouri volunteering information about the gummies, and he said he didn't see any in the house. He didn't see any illicit drugs or drug paraphernalia, and that was it for the state. And the defense is up. Ooh, it was fiery. It was Ramos. He asked if once he arrived at the house, did he turn off his body camera at any point? And he doesn't remember. He's asked, if you did, when would you have done that? And the witness said when the call was over. The defense says if you had it turned off, you would have put that in your report. And the witness says yes. He asked if the witness was there when Eric's body was removed, and he was not. What time did you leave? The deputy says that the report doesn't have an exact time, but it was after other deputies arrived. They talk about what kind of software his body camera uses. He's asked how many times he's used the body cam, and the witness says possibly thousands. The defense says, and in those thousands of times, you've uploaded the footage, correct? The witness said the camera system has changed and they have a different process, but the video would upload once he's back at the office on a secure Wi-Fi network. He's asked where he went in the house, and the witness said just the living room. He's asked if he's worked with paramedics and EMS in the past, and he says with one. He's asked if he went to the kitchen or looked in the scene, meaning where Eric was. No. Did you tell another investigator to go to the kitchen or look in the sink? No. The defense says when somebody loses their life, it's important, right? Obviously, the witness says yes. He's asked if there was a photo taken of the hydrocodone bottle or was it taken into evidence? And the witness is like, I didn't do it. So he's asked if anybody did. And he doesn't remember. He's asked about the drink that they had that night and if he knew that Kouri's mom was there. He didn't know. The defense attorney says, really? Did you search for gummies? He said he was not in charge of searching for medications. That's somebody else's job. So the defense says they'll ask the other deputy when he is called to testify. He's asked if he agrees that this scene is traumatic. And there's a such thing as secondary trauma. And the witness says yes. He asked, where did you find out about the gummies? And he said, Kouri. Did you ask Kouri where the gummies were? No. They move on to talk about the temperature of the home. It was 71 degrees. The defense is talking about the importance of time and documenting times that are relevant. And then he asks about when Kouri went to sleep. At this point, the defense asks if they can stop now and pick it up tomorrow. So that was how the day ended. They did show the pictures on the stream that Kouri looked at after Eric died, and they were memes about money. One shows somebody wiping their eyes with dollar bills. Just not a good look for somebody who was on trial for the murder of her husband. But that's where we left it today. Tomorrow, remember, live stream in 10:30 Eastern. Come watch with us, and I will update you tomorrow to be a little more timely. I'm going to be on Josh Ritter's podcast at 8 Eastern. So this will come out after, and then I have to do CNN at around 11:45. So if you're awake, tune in. We'll be talking about this case. That is it for now. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. We will see you soon.